This is the iPhone 16, the iPhone 16 Plus, the 16 Pro, and the 16 Pro Max. So every new iPhone, as well as a bucket load of new accessories. And this is where we find out if these things are actually good or not. So let's unbox the iPhone 16 and 16 Plus first. And notice, Apple did say this is now an even smaller package compared to last year's phones. I have to be honest, I can barely tell the difference. It's about 6% smaller in reality. But it does look like they have rearranged the entire inside to accommodate this shrink. So now you get the phone, there's a USB-C cable combined with a SIM ejector, and it looks like no Apple stickers this time around. And here's our iPhone 16. These are also apparently the first iPhones to have 100% wood fiber-based packaging, which is good, although last year's phones had 99%, so let's not get too excited. And this is iPhone 16 Plus.
Wow.
And I'm actually kind of happy about these colors. This is the closest we've been in a long time to, well, just actually proper blue and pink. Very expensive gender reveal, anyone? So, having actually used the phones, I would genuinely say the audio mixing feature is unexpectedly crazy cool. So you guys start having a conversation now. And while they're talking behind the phone, I'm talking to you guys standing in front of the phone. So this is kind of like the equivalent of me being on a movie set and I'm the cameraman and they're the actors that I'm filming. Okay, let's see what that clip looked like. So open it up, head into the edit, and then click audio mix. So there's 4 options here. We'll start with the default way that the iPhone sounds.
Audio tips me.
And while they're talking behind the phone, I'm talking to you guys standing in front of the phone. Bit of a mess, right? But then you click in frame.
Flower, so you want double flower, so it's like really fine. And the eggs, you want really rich.
My audio basically disappears. It's like a magic trick. There is more to this feature, but I'll get to it when we talk about the Pro phones. Okay, so what about gaming? Because the iPhone 16s have jumped forward 2 generations in terms of their chip this time around, this should be one of the biggest changes. And now also means that these phones have access to that same library of console games that only the pros could play last year. So why don't we see how they run? Man, the idea of playing like proper console Assassin's Creed on my phone is basically a childhood dream. Okay, really impressive draw distances, meaning that like it's kind of crazy that I can see stuff happening on the other side of this massive city. The game is running smooth. It's a very consistent 30 frames per second. I would say you can tell that a lot of settings have had to be very far dialed back from the console versions, to the point where it does kind of still look like a mobile game, but then the upside is that it doesn't feel like a mobile game in terms of the scope of it. It's massive. I'm impressed. Yeah, I'm not blown away, but I'm impressed. Now, 2 of the most obvious changes on the iPhone 16 are both camera related. One is the new layout of the cameras, which unlocks this new option in the camera app called spatial video. And I have played around with it. It's lower quality than normal video. It only shoots in 1080p. But if you do somehow happen to have a Vision Pro lying around, it is surprisingly transportative. It really does take you there. But then again, you know, this was the first time I used my Vision Pro since my review 6 months ago. This isn't a useful enough gadget for this feature that only works on this gadget to mean anything, but that might change in the future. The second thing is this new camera control that you get on the side. This is the thing that's in all the TikToks. This is what people are talking about. So a heavy press on it takes a photo. A light press activates the zoom slider, so you have full control over zoom by swiping along it. And then a double light press opens up a menu, which if you don't want the swipe gesture to control zoom, allows you to select something else that it can control. And when I first went hands-on with it, my very first hot take was, why? Like, who asked for this? So now that I've had some proper time to get to know it, has my opinion changed? Well, it has allowed me to appreciate the attention to detail that's gone into it. I like the fact that it's flush with the body of the phone, so it's not yet another protrusion that makes the thing uncomfortable to hold. I like that you have a surprising amount of control over how the control works, with settings like how firm you need to press to activate the thing. I like the little bit of haptic feedback you get every time you hit a key magnification number as you're zooming in. And it is quite cool that the official Apple cases cover and protect the camera control while keeping the swiping gestures completely usable. But no, my opinion has not changed. I think this is dumb. You have to lower your grip to reach it. You have to arch your thumb in a way that genuinely causes me hand strain. You got to hold your phone tighter than usual because you're now supporting it less. And after all that, you're more likely to get last-minute camera shake because you're heavy pressing a button as opposed to lightly tapping your screen. And if that wasn't enough, it also feels like in trying to make this camera control work for both the portrait orientations and the landscape orientations, they've just made it not good with either. Because for portrait, it needs to be higher up, so you're not going like this. And for landscape, it needs to be lower, like here, so you can actually reach it without using some weird, unconventional hand claw. Separately though, I will say I appreciate how you can now pause a video recording, so you can have multiple separate clips in one video as opposed to having multiple videos. And also how you don't need to stop whatever music is playing on your phone when you start recording. These are both overdue, but good improvements for creators in iOS 18. But what about the photo quality? Because while the main camera hasn't changed on this 16, you know that new A18 chip that the phone has? It does contain a brand new image signal processor, which every year is becoming a bigger factor for your photos. So I thought this would be a fun thing to do. This is the iPhone 16, this is last year's iPhone 15, and then this is an iPhone 12, which I imagine is closer to what most of you might be upgrading from. Okay, I'm gonna jump in the shot and finger guns. Why did I say that? Right, yeah, there's basically zero difference between the 15 and the 16. You can definitely see substantial upgrades from the 12 in terms of detail, texture, color. That's not really something to brag about, that's expected. And between the 15 and 16, I can't see anything. The 16, though, can get way closer to things to take macro photos now that the ultra-wide camera has autofocus. And there is some improvement to the colors and the overall smoothness when it comes to night photos. I guess because there's more processing in low light shots, you notice the difference in the processor more. Oh yeah, and the other thing, because the chip is faster this time around, these new iPhones can do way better quality quick take video. You know when you're in photo mode, but you just need to capture something right now, you can hold down on the camera button. And iPhones used to take a squarish looking lower resolution video. That's what most phones do, because when you're in photo mode, your phone is ready and geared to taking photos, not video. But the new phones can just go straight into full resolution 4K recording. But let's be very clear, if what you're after is big camera improvements, this ain't it. That's coming on the 16 Pros, which I'm getting to. The only other camera feature that Apple did spend a fair bit of time talking about is photographic styles, and how this year they're splitting these styles into mood, which are more the striking filter-like settings, and then undertones, which are more about how you want to look in your photos. Traditionally, iPhones have always tended to make skin tones a little warmer than they are in reality, but the idea of these undertones is to give that control back to you to decide. That said, I've tested all of them, and all it did was make me come to the conclusion that I prefer the standard one that iPhones have been using by default since the beginning. Okay, only other thing that I wanted to mention before we go to the Pro iPhones is, at the launch event, Apple said that the glass on the front of these phones is 50% stronger than last gen. And that meant basically nothing to anyone because they didn't explain it. But I think I've managed to find out how now. So the problem with glass on its own is that the atoms within glass have a pretty weak structure. Their arrangement is disordered, which means that if you apply pressure to glass, the atoms can't smoothly glide over each other, so the material doesn't flex, it shatters. And so a few years ago, Apple realized that by infusing that glass with tiny clear pieces of ceramic, which has a much more organized 3D matrix of atoms, they could create more structure within the display, and therefore more ability to withstand pressure. And so the new thing this time around is they've improved the organization of ceramic within the glass, which increases the compressive stress capacity of the display. Or in other words, this might not be significantly less likely to crack, but if it does crack, that crack is a lot less likely to spread out across the entire screen. So there you go. I had to make sure I got to the bottom of that one. And that's basically it for all the new stuff that the iPhone 16s do, except for the action button, which the Pro phones had last year, a better battery, and Apple Intelligence, but I'm getting to that. Okay, time for the top-end phones. iPhone 16 Pro and 16 Pro Max. They used to do this cool thing where the base phones had white packaging and the Pros came with black, but I guess that's officially buried now. Maybe the colored dyes were adding to the pollution. So this is the 16 Pro, which we have in the same natural titanium color as last year's phones came in. And then for the Pro Max, this is desert titanium, which is the only new color this year. I feel like Apple is really spacing out the innovation here. And honestly, to me, this feels disappointingly stale for the one flagship new color. But then while we're here, this is what the new cases look like. So it seems like fine woven cases are officially dead. That's probably for the best, but it's quite funny how much of a disaster that was. So we're back to silicon now. And this is, I mean, it's good quality, but it is expensive for a case. There's the new clear case, which I would personally never go for because they just get sticky and fingerprinty. And these are the new AirPods 4 with noise cancellation, which come with a set of papers for some reason, and then it's just the earphones in their case. I have tested these, by the way, so quick mini review. good product. They don't feel too big in your ears, so you completely forget they're there. They're super light, but then at the same time, they give like zero indication that they could fall out when you shake your head around. The noise cancellation is the best I have ever heard for earphones with no ear tips, and there's practically zero leakage either, even for people sitting right next to you. The sound quality isn't as good as the AirPod Pros, and I'd say that even though the noise cancellation does make them sound quite a bit better than the previous standard AirPods, you wouldn't have to look hard to find better sounding earphones for $180. But they sound a lot better than the previous gen standard AirPods, mostly thanks to the noise isolation. So I'm still going to stick to the Pros, but I'm glad to see that there is now a decent Apple-made option for people who don't like the feeling of pressure that you can get from ear tips. Okay, and then finally for this unboxing, this is the upgraded MagSafe charger. It is cool how every single product down to the accessories has the same peeling experience, and that it always seems to work. And then the kind of chunky 30-watt power brick that lets you get the best speed out of that MagSafe charger. More on these in a bit. So, first thing I want to look at with these phones is audio. You know how we looked at the audio mixing feature on the base iPhones? Well, while the feature does completely work both on the non-Pro and the Pros, it's even better on the Pros, thanks to 4 supposedly studio-grade microphones. And so I thought these phones would be a really cool way to show you this other type of audio mix called Studio that makes the microphones sound like they're really close to your mouth. Check this out. So this is me talking to you using normal phone audio, and it sounds phone-like. You hear a little bit of everything. This is what it sounds like when we switch over to Studio. And as someone who spends a lot of time messing around with microphones, trying to get the best out of every scene, I find this absolutely mind-blowing. It is crazy that this is recorded on a phone and nothing else. That said, you can have the coolest, most unique, innovative feature in the world, but will I actually use this audio mix stuff? Probably not that often. It's nice to have the reassurance that at any time I want, I can, because every iPhone 16 is recording spatial 360 audio by default anyway, so it's not like you're having to do or think about anything extra. But yeah, I am struggling to see the average user trawling through their entire library of videos, tweaking whose audio they want to prioritize in each clip. But different story entirely if you're buying the iPhone as your main filmmaking tool. For most of our videos, I still prefer the way that a Sony camera looks and the way that a Rode microphone sounds. But if you're looking at the iPhone 16 Pro to be your primary content creation device, then the audio on them just got very quickly very good. But camera quality should actually be the biggest upgrade this year. So this is an iPhone 15 Pro Max, this is an iPhone 16 Pro Max, and that is a particularly challenging lighting environment. We are shooting against the sun. All right, hit me. And that looks basically the same, although 16 Pro Max is actually slightly better at keeping the blue sky looking blue even through the trees. But the main benefit of the new phone over the old phone is not actually meant to be picture quality. It's meant to be the fact that the new phone has a faster sensor that can capture more information quickly. So, can you take photos faster? Little known feature of the iPhones, by the way, if you tap and hold the shutter button and drag it to the left-hand side, you rapid fire. And nope, they have shot the exact same number of photos. I will say though, if you just mash that shutter button, then the new iPhone is definitely taking more shots and it's freezing up less. But no one does that. What actually would be useful to see though is if you just wanted to take one high-resolution 48 megapixel photo, can the new phone take it faster? So I'm going to stand in front of these phones. I'm going to throw this ball in the air and we're going to capture at exactly the same time. So in theory, whichever phone's photo has the ball lower in the air has captured the photo faster. 3, 2, 1. Oh my God. You took these at the same time?
Yeah, it's actually so quick you don't even see the shutter.
That's actually a much bigger difference than I was expecting. It looks like I've used AI to remove the ball on the first photo, but it's actually just disappeared out of the frame. Man, I swear, this is like the coolest thing I own. But the main tangible benefit to this faster sensor, according to Apple at least, is meant to be video. Where the iPhone 15 Pros can shoot a max of 4K video at 60 frames per second, the new phone can do 4K 120. But let's actually investigate that. So this is a water balloon. I'm actually pretty scared this is going to be explosive. Oh God. Also, separate note, even though the screen on the new phone is meant to be just as bright as that of the old phone, we can't get it to the same level of brightness. It seems to be consistently slightly dimmer. But hey, at least as far as the video quality is concerned, it looks like there is basically zero compromise, even though we've doubled the frame rate from last year. I have seen 4K 120 on other phones before, but it has never looked this good. And the nice thing about this frame rate is you can slow that footage down
man,
4
that is
times and
cool.
still get a smooth result. The previous 60 frame per second footage kind of falls apart here. Right, so what about how much storage space it takes up? So the clip is 1 minute 25 on both phones, and the storage size is not quite double, but very nearly double. So 1 minute 25 is nearly a gigabyte. That means that the entire storage of the iPhone 16 Pro base model, so 128 gigs, will be taken up with less than 3 hours of footage on the camera. That is not good. Also, another thing that I thought was interesting was, let's say I take a video at 120 frames per second. I slow that down to 25% speed on my phone, but then I want to share that video with someone else. You get options. You can either share that video with no metadata, which means that the other person will just get the video as you intended it to be, or you send with everything, which means that they get all of this info associated with that file and they can reverse engineer it themselves. And same thing for photographic styles. You can take a photo in one style, you can decide later if you want to shift over to a different style. And then if you share it, the other person can also completely reverse any tone changes you've made or tweak it in a different direction, all without any loss to image quality, because the details of the original image are baked into the data of the shot, even when it's edited. However, it's actually the ultra-wide cameras that I'm most curious about. The new phone has a 48 megapixel ultra-wide camera, which will still actually shoot 12 megapixel photos like the last phone by default. So what you need to do is to tap HEIF Max here. And once you've done that once, you never need to do it again. It means that from now on, your phone will always shoot the highest resolution photo that it possibly can, depending on what zoom magnification you're using. Although, it's not for free, because everything is going to take up more storage space. And also, even though the main camera, as we've seen, has this faster sensor that can capture these high-resolution photos quicker, the ultra-wide does not, so that takes longer to capture in this mode. That said, if the quality is much better, then worthwhile trade-off. Let's see. Oh, yes, actually, substantial detail upgrade. And actually, if you look at the fabric on my hoodie, you can see quite a bit less noise as well. Not to mention it's managed to brighten my dark joggers a little bit, so the high dynamic range is better. It's actually just all around a vastly upgraded photo. And also, a more detailed ultra-wide camera should also mean more detailed macro photos. Okay, this is working a little different to how I expected. So I was expecting that because this is a 48 megapixel ultra-wide camera, you would actually be able to take 48 megapixel macro photos, but when you're on the automatic macro mode of the phone and you take a shot, it's still actually only taking a 12 megapixel photo because the phone is actually cropping into that 48 megapixel sensor to get as close as possible. That said, because you're cropping in using a higher resolution base, the new phone's macros are still noticeably more detailed than the old phones.
Yeah, more detailed.
I also took a bunch of night photos to see if I could spot any trends, and there is definitely an improvement, but it's definitely not a massive improvement. Right, before we get to the real elephant in the room with this whole Apple Intelligence shenanigan, so these new iPhones are kind of weird when it comes to charging. Like I said, the next gen industry standard for wireless charging is Qi 2, which allows phones to charge with 15 watts of power.
15 watts.
These phones can actually charge with up to 25 watts if you splurged on the almost $100 combo of Apple's 25-watt MagSafe charger and 30-watt brick. You need a higher power brick because some power is lost when you're wireless charging. But then at the same time, Apple's wired charging speed is so slow compared to the competition that they are maybe the only company whose wireless charging is apparently the same speed as their wired charging. It feels like yet another indicator that Apple is really eyeing up the idea of a completely portless iPhone one day. Okay, so the final question that we need to answer is Apple Intelligence. Is it good? Does it save the iPhone 16s from becoming what would otherwise be a very minor update? Well, here's where I have a couple of bones to pick. Firstly, if you buy an iPhone 16 now, you will not get Apple Intelligence straight out the box. It's coming in a software update later, although I've set up a beta so that I can show you now. And secondly, it's not exclusive to these phones, which isn't in itself a problem. It's good when more people can experience these features, but it just makes the launch event feel a little misleading because Apple spent half of the iPhone 16 section talking about Apple Intelligence. But then the fact that almost everything also works on the iPhone 15 Pro means that those features have very little to do with iPhone 16 hardware. Anyways, here's my rapid-fire thoughts having spent some time with Apple Intelligence now. The summaries that it gives you to your emails are actually a really useful way to quickly catch up with the full context of a conversation. Cleanup is a really quick, snappy way to remove distractions from photos, but I would actually say its results seem less good than they do on my Google Pixel. I really like the way that Smart Replies is integrated, but it only works for answering specific types of questions and doesn't exactly do it with much pizzazz. It's a little flat with how it responds. One of the key categories of features is writing tools. They're available system-wide, so whatever app you're in, if you highlight a bunch of text and tap writing tools, you get these options. And I don't really use any of these rewriting tools because for me, tone is so important, and something in my tone always seems to get lost whenever I try it. The key points and summary features, though, are really cool at distilling big chunks of text down to smaller bytes. I don't use them myself because I don't quite trust them. Like, if I'm saying something on a video to potentially millions of people, I need to double, triple check that that information is right. Whereas getting my information through an AI's interpretation of a source, as opposed to the source itself, is like a fast track to something getting lost in communication. And that's basically all I can really test properly with the current beta. I've got high hopes for Siri once it gets ChatGPT integration, but right now it's not doing much more than the Siri you're used to. So, as for what I think to all of these new iPhones, even though it feels like we're on the precipice of transformative changes to the software, most of those things aren't here yet. And what was meant to be one of the biggest hardware changes, this camera control, is, I think, a bit of a stretch.
Man, you tell me in the comment section which iPhone model have you liked the most and which color did you like the most as well. I have liked iPhone 16 marine blue color, yeah, and I have liked that camera feature as well, and all those camera related features, because if one day I have money, I will definitely buy that for my video taking purposes, yeah.
In both senses of the word. That said, while they're not the most exciting phones to upgrade to, if you're on like an iPhone 12 and you've been holding out for the next thing, they are safe phones to upgrade to. They're fast, the base iPhone 16s have good screens, and the Pros have great screens this time, although the base iPhones do still have that 60Hz refresh rate, which if you're used to having better, will make them feel laggy. But also, battery improvements are always very appreciated over here, and the battery has been great on all of these new phones. But more on that in my battery test, which is hopefully going live in a couple of days. So, see you there.